Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always, my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, it's not a Villa Filler if it's not late night, is it? How you doing, bro?
Absolutely not, mate. Absolutely not. Yeah, man. All good. All good. I can't believe it's here again, mate. Can't believe it's here again. Pre-season has come around. All of a sudden, the 2023-24 season is up and underway, really. It feels like just a matter of weeks. We were sat here, discussing that Brighton game, and then all of a sudden, bang, straight back into it. It's crazy how fast, given the calendar that we have now and all of these different sort of responsibilities that we have to fulfill in terms of getting over to the States and all the stuff happening at Warsaw, the calendar is just crazy. Kind of feel for the lads a little bit because I imagine, they're due a very well-earned break, especially the under-21s that have gone off to the Euros and everything. Just feels relentless, doesn't it? But it's good news for me and you.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. We was just saying off air, we're ready for things to pick up. I think we'll regret that in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Come the start of the season, we'll already be exhausted. But I think given the fact that, we've got some business done, we're still waiting for the Torres sort of confirmation. With pre-season starting, as you say, I would expect 1 or 2 in and outgoings to pick up. I think one that that's sort of been discussed over the past week or so, mate, since we've last spoken, was Dendoncker, and has been willing to listen to offers for Leander, and he's apparently got suitors in France. And I think where I stand on him, I'd obviously love to know what you think, but I think for me, if we're getting I think if we get back what we paid, I think that's more than fair. And if we have to sell to buy, not in the sense that we can't, but it just makes sense to, because we've got another of either maybe a Guendouzi or a Tyler Adams, or Weston McKennie is another one who has been sort of bandied about over the past week as well. If one of those guys are coming in and the opportunity to sell Leander for what we paid for him, was it 12 months ago, 18 months ago now, arises, I wouldn't necessarily be against it, but I'm not willingly trying to sell him. I quite like Leander. There's something about him. He's lengthy, isn't he? To use a FIFAism, but he doesn't look very technical, but he sort of offers something that I think is quite unique to the squad. I think is fair to say.
Yeah, I think he's a good player, and I think there's a team out there for him. I think he just probably wants to play football. Yeah, to be honest with you, I imagine that's just what he wants to do. I just think he's kind of gone from being bit part of Wolves to being a bit part of Villa, and probably just feels that he's been living in this city for a fair few years now, and it's just never made any ground in it really, and so. I totally understand it, to be honest with you. I think a move to the continent, I think Serie A is a league that would really suit his pace and playing style. That's not to say he's not up to it in the Premier League, but I just think that languid, as you say, quite lengthy, quite technical for his position. I think those kind of leagues would suit him really well. I think it would be a shame. I think it's one where you're probably going to find it hard to bring someone in that offers that kind of versatility, that kind of quality at that price. He's probably going to be sold for, just because of his role in the squad, for less than what he's probably worth as a footballer, to be honest with you. I think he's a better footballer than, £5 to £50 million move to the continent is going to suggest. But yeah, he probably wants to go and play some football, and for that, I really can't begrudge him that, to be honest with you.
I think that's the issue. We speak about it all the time. We're not very good at selling players, and where it becomes, I guess, a bit more frustrating is obviously Adams, who I just mentioned. Leeds are waiting for £40 million. Nobody is going to pay £40 million to Tyler Adams, not because he's not worth £40 million, but because they're in the Championship, and eventually you will be able to get him for probably, I would say, under maybe 35 million. They paid about 25. I reckon you could probably haggle them down to about 30. But that's the thing, is it worth? I mean, as you say, it could be anywhere from 5 to 15 for Leander, realistically, depending on who comes knocking. Is it worth taking that loss to then get someone like Adams or McKennie? And I mean, long-time viewers of the channel will know I am a big Weston McKennie fan. it's not something to be proud of right now after his loan spell at Leeds. I do think there is a player in there. Still have reservations, but I do think that if the price is right, I would have him. But I guess it all kind of rides on who that replacement is, really.
Yep, I would totally agree, mate. So yeah, let's watch this space.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. But we've got some more exciting players to talk about than Leander Dendoncker, with all due respect given to Leander, but we do rate him. Dan, we'll start with you, mate. Lois Openda. This is an exciting one, purely for me because it's another Belgian forward. Not had one since Christian Benteke. We've gone from talking about Leander, one Belgian, straight into another, and the project at Lens is so exciting, and Openda has been spearheading that, really, mate. He's been absolutely fantastic. Some of Europe's biggest clubs after him, and also some newcomers on the scene as well. Leipzig pushing really hard. I think a lot of this depends on where there's going to be a bit of a striker domino, isn't there, this summer, mate, with the likes of Balogun and Openda and players like that. I think, that probably goes as far as Osimhen and Højlund as well, really, doesn't it? But this is a very exciting player, a very exciting team. I'm not sure about it though, mate. I'm not sure about it because the reports come from. It appears to be like a journalist who specialises in Lens. I mean, I'll let you talk about him for a little bit first, and then I'll give my opinions, mate. Because this is an exciting one. This is a player to be excited about, but it's that position that we're still looking for, isn't it? That extra sort of right-sided attacker.
Yeah, totally. I think it's important to start this conversation with sort of saying that this kind of a striker of this reputation is what I think Villa have to be aiming for, because I think we have to continue to lean on Ollie Watkins. I think, again, he has earned the right to be first choice. We really doubled down on faith on him when we sold Danny Ings in January. We gave him the second half of the season under Unai Emery, and he repaid that faith hand over foot. Had the best spell he's had in a claret and blue shirt in those sort of 6 months. Obviously, an amazing run of goals, and I'd be very shocked if going into the first day of next season, Newcastle away, there's anybody other than Ollie Watkins starting up front for Aston Villa. And the problem is, if you go and sign, not only is it a very difficult market right now to go and shop for a number 9 in, I think you only have to sort of look at some of Europe's top clubs right now and who they're recruiting in that number 9 position. I mean, you look at Real Madrid bringing in someone like Joselu. Look at Manchester United going after someone like Rasmus Højlund, who got, I think, 7 or 8 Serie A goals last season. Do you know what I'm trying to say? That, there's not a lot of great... Obviously, there's a lot of great number 9s out there, not a lot on the market. And then you've got someone like Victor Osimhen, and who's going to go for 150 million. Someone like Dusan Vlahovic, who hasn't had the best time at Juventus, but because of this drought of number 9s, like every man and his dog is going to be wanting him. I think someone like Lois Openda, probably for Aston Villa, who's looking at maybe a rotation piece, is probably fits the bill in that regard. I think he's had a very, very good season, and it's really important to start the conversation there. He scored 21 goals in 38 Ligue 1 games. I feel like Lens, you rightly throw them some credit, mate, really slept on last season. They finished second in Ligue 1, just 1 point behind the title winners PSG. So, that title race could have so easily gone the other way. He's coming off back-to-back seasons that were really impressive. Both of he joined Lens from Club Brugge, but he had a loan spell in Vitesse the season before he headed to France. 19 goals there. He's just been on a really nice upwards trajectory. 9 caps for Belgium, 2 goals against Poland and Egypt. Back-to-back Ligue 1 Player of the Month in March and April as he closed the season really strongly in that time. He ended a drought of 8 games without a goal by scoring the fastest hat-trick in Ligue 1 history, 4 minutes and 30 seconds in an away game. They won 4-0 against Clermont Foot, and he wrapped in 3 goals in that time. leading on team of the season, locked out that right wing spot ahead of Lionel Messi, just 23 years old. As I said, you rightly point out that Leipzig are apparently interested in. Similar sort of journalists are saying they've put 45 million on the table and Lons have said no. And it's easy to see why they'd hold out for a little bit more than that, because you look at some of the sales that have come out of France in recent years, guys like Nicolas Pepe and other players sort of coming out of there for like 70 odd million. It's easy to see why they'd want to hold out for a little bit more than that. I mean, Victor Osimhen, a player I've just mentioned, is another example. He came out of, I think Lille. Yeah, it was Lille, wasn't it? Yeah, for 70 million euros as well. So it's easy to see after the season they've just had for Openda, another sort of 23-year-old capped by his country. It's easy to see why they want to hold out for a little bit more. I understand that, he's not the sexiest name, which is interesting considering the season he's just had. I think some Villa fans are wanting to see a blockbuster number 9 come in through the door, but I think that's going to be difficult. And whilst, yes, it's a fair bit of money, it does seem to be on that right kind of trajectory. To be honest with you, I understand why a lot of fans would want him, and I understand the complaints against, mate. I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
I mean, the last Belgium striker weren't bad, was he?
No, very true.
Big Kristen let us down. What I like about Openda is he's quite small, he's nimble, he's agile, and I think he offers something completely different in that this isn't somebody who's going to be, I mean, first and foremost, he is a number 9, but I could see him actually partnering with Ollie. I don't know what you think about that, mate. I think you could easily play Openda off Ollie. We've seen how good Watkins' sort of build-up play can be. I know Unai has kind of wanted him to do a bit less of that and be that sort of fox in the box. That is exactly what Openda is, though. And he's an absolute pressing machine. Lons are just relentless. They're absolutely relentless. And Openda leads that line so well. What I also like is the variety of goals. In that 21 goals, as you mentioned, mate, there's 6-headed goals, 7 right-footed goals, 8 left-footed goals. He just knows how to find the back of the net, mate. And that is something that you can't coach. I do, as you say, mate, he's on a fantastic trajectory. And I do think, as you say, because of the Vlahovic's, because of the Højlunds, because of the Osimhens, who are the sort of the ones who we've seen have been touted by the bigger clubs across Europe, this is one that I think a club a rung or two below, which is obviously where we would come into this debate, is the destination where I think Openda would find himself going. I don't see any point in going from Ligue 1 to the Bundesliga, if I'm being completely honest. I think at this moment in time, Ligue 1 is probably a way more competitive league than the Bundesliga, and he could do a lot better than go to RB Leipzig. And listen, they are obviously going to regularly be competing in the Champions League, at least at the group stages. But I can really see Openda succeeding in the Premier League. I think Ligue 1 and the Premier League are actually more similar than a lot of people would like to admit. I think in terms of the how much of a transitional game it is in France, I think the gap from French football to English football is probably shorter than that of German football. I mean, we've seen it with Leon Bailey, haven't we, really, mate? We've seen players from Jadon Sancho, another one as well, struggle to acclimatise to the Premier League. And it happens in France. I'm not saying it doesn't, but we've seen plenty of players from France come over and thrive in the Premier League. A list that I don't even need to go through because you guys will know there's so many legendary French players who played in the Premier League. As I said, I think he can partner with Ollie, mate. What do you think? Because as well, like Brennan Johnson, another name that's been bandied about, we're talking 50 million quid for him as well. Like, obviously Johnson isn't a forward, but he's going to operate in that sort of right forward position for us, however you want to look at it. Got some stick on TikTok for that with the sort of Johnson and Archer comparisons, but the point I was trying to make was that they're going to play in the same position. I know Johnson isn't a striker, but he would play in a forward position. And then it's Cam as well. Like, you talk about Cam. Here we are talking about Cameron Archer again. Like, but this almost feels too good to pass up on, doesn't it? Really, mate. Especially, I say especially at the price, 45 million for Openda. there's upside there because he'll come to the Premier League, he'll score goals, and you could see him play for an Arsenal, really, I think, mate, couldn't you? You could easily go and make 20 million quid on him, flip him to Arsenal in a year or two.
Yeah, but this is a really difficult thing because you sort of have to negotiate the game time and stuff like that. I think he's a very different player to Ollie Watkins, and I think it's interesting you've sort of mentioned Brennan Johnson because I think they profile out quite similarly, to be fair. Lois Openda is a real kind of on-the-shoulder, rapid player. He's got pace to burn, really nice carrier of the ball, ranks in the top 18 percentile for progressive carries for strikers in Europe. Outperformed his XG as well, which is always interesting for a striker because it's not by much. His non-penalty XG was 0.63 per 90 last season. He came in at 0.72. So it's just under 0.1% higher there. And there is obviously the general school of thought that XG levels out sort of at some point. But when I mentioned he's come off 2 really good back-to-back goal-scoring seasons, and whilst I don't think he'd necessarily come to the Prem and slap in 20+ goals, it's nice to see that, we've sort of had some conversations about strikers where it has been a bit flash in the pan. Someone like, that's the risk with someone like a Flo Balogun, who's come off a very similar scoring season in Liga 1, but has only done it for the one season, sort of in that league, whereas this guy's made the step up from the Eredivisie, where he scored 20+ goals, to Liga 1, where he scored 20+ goals, and then you'd imagine wherever that next step is, there's going to be a similar kind of return if he can get that same kind of minutes, which is, I think, where we went into sort of a little kind of problem. Players from Liga, like, I think you're right. I think more often than not, they come in and do well. You only have to look at someone like, more recently, that crop that arrived from that Monaco team, like your Fabinhos, your Bernardo Silvas, everybody like that, sort of have done quite well. It's interesting that someone like Nicola Pepe didn't really, but I'd never really liked that transfer too much at the time. And to be honest with you, I never really got the proper run of starts. Just a bit of an odd move in general. So I think, yes, it's a league where I'd have probably a bit more faith than coming from the Bundesliga, which is probably a nice segue perhaps into the next player, mate.
Absolutely, mate. And this, again, is a very similar profile of player here, Mousa Diaby of Bayer Leverkusen. And the story at Leverkusen is quite interesting, really, because they obviously semi-recently appointed Xabi Alonso. And they, before that, looked almost doomed. Like, they looked like they were in very serious danger of going down. Alonso's come in, and, for all that tactical nous of all of the great managers he's played under, your Pep Guardiola's, your Jose Mourinho's, your Carlo Ancelotti's, Rafa Benitez, you name it, Alonso's played under them. And he seems to he's probably one of the young managers right now that a few teams are probably going to be taking a look at and going, I think we could take a risk here. And the appointment from Leverkusen, has, they're reaping the rewards of that risk at the moment. They had a fantastic end to the season, and Diaby was a very key player. And it's interesting because it feels like over the past sort of 4 years, mate, there has been a player leave Bayer Leverkusen for like a very large fee and then make their way over to the Premier League. We've had Leon Bailey, obviously, who we signed. Kai Havertz came. Florian Wirtz is the latest, who has been linked with moves, obviously coming from their academy. But Diaby, he can play on both sides, predominantly on the right. And again, he's another sort of on-the-shoulder winger. But he's very involved. 33 matches played last season, 33 starts, bagged himself 9 goals, with an expected goals tally of 11.06. But as you say, mate, that tends to always sort of even itself out at some point. He's a really exciting player, really quick, really transitional. And I think the one thing that I can take from these two links, and we kind of spoke about potentially having a bit of not a different identity, but a plan B in the last podcast, mate, when you suggested about playing a back five. It appears to me that at least with these kind of players that we're talking about, with Diaby and Openda, Unai Emery is potentially looking at being a bit more aggressive and sort of pressing at a much higher intensity, because you look at these guys, these are players who will very easily fit into a Jurgen Klopp system at Liverpool. These are very, very fit, very athletic, high pressing players, which I find quite interesting. And he's come through Paris Saint-Germain's academy. So many good players have come from there, not necessarily played for Paris Saint-Germain, but have gone on and made a name for themselves on the continent. Christopher Nkunku is one who's obviously signed with Chelsea. They were both teammates at Paris Saint-Germain. And this is someone who I think we can get excited by, mate. So last season, the Bundesliga, scored 9 goals, assisted 8. Obviously played in the Champions League as well, got 2 goals there, 3 goals in the Europa League. I think they made it to the round of 16 by Leverkusen. And, he's actually a very similar player to Ferran Torres as well, which is somebody who just can't seem to stop talking about this guy, mate. The name keeps popping back up. It's definitely one to keep an eye out on. I know Arsenal have been linked, and I think this is one that's going to cost you at the very least 40 million quid, French international. So there's going to be, you're going to pay a bit of a premium there, but it's very interesting that we've kind of, Barnes is seemingly on his way to Newcastle at the moment, isn't he, mate? That's what the sort of the how the land is laying there. But he's a very different profile, Diaby and Openda, to a Barnes and even to a Willy Gnonto, who's someone who we've not spoken about either. These guys are very quick, very direct, like to get into the box, like to score goals, and I don't want to curse it, mate. I don't want to say there's a bit of Leon Bailey about him, but there's a reason why Bayer Leverkusen signed him. I don't know. It's just, obviously he joined in 2019, but he's kind of really sort of come into his own since Leon left. 31 goals and 125 appearances all time for Leverkusen. But yeah, this is quite interesting. He's obviously only 24 as well. But these guys aren't your sort of keep possession and go type. These are the guys who are going to be finishing the chances. These are the guys who are going to be running at fullbacks at pace. And again, that could signify a change in style, maybe a plan B. But somebody who comes with European pedigree, this is something I'd really welcome, mate.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look, shall we? Because we have Leon Bailey as a kind of ever-present reminder there of the difficulties that you can face when you're picking players from the Bundesliga. As you say, a league that hasn't really transferred very well to the Premier League by and large. So let's have a look, right, at how they did in Germany. So I've got Leon's all-time record here for Bayer Leverkusen. Thankfully, what's interesting is they played a very similar amount of games in the Bundesliga, which makes comparing these two quite easy. So Leon played, yes, indeed. 119 games Leon played in the Bundesliga to Mousa Diaby's 125. So 6 games difference. Bear that in mind. In that time, in those 119 games, Leon Bailey racked up 28 goals and 21 assists. But in 125, so just 6 games extra, Mousa Diaby has 31 goals, so 3 more goals than Leon did in his time in Germany, and 38 assists, so an extra 17 assists. So he's got a far greater output domestically in Germany. If we look at the Europa League, again, very similar number of games played. Leon played 27 games in the in the Europa League. He scored 10 goals and got 5 assists. Mousa Diaby played just 1 game more, got 12 goals and 8 assists. So he's got, let me run that. So 2 extra goals in the Europa League for Leverkusen and 2 extra assists as well. So you can see that his output is generally better. I don't think that this is a club that you want to see as learning from our mistakes, and I'd be a bit hesitant about it as well, because this is a young winger coming from Leverkusen that we just, that's a path that we've trodden very, very recently, and so I think we'd have to be careful. I think I dare say that he's clearly operating at a higher level than Leon was at his time in Germany, which gives you sort of some hope, and you can't really sort of say that, Newcastle are interested, so we're not the only ones. Like, I think it was a very similar situation with Leon Bailey. There was several links to the Premier League before he made his trip over. So just something to be like kind of a little bit careful of maybe. But, there is a greater output. But at the same time, I think it would be, we just need to be a little bit careful maybe.
I think so. Yeah, that's the thing. When we're talking about splashing like 30, 40 million quid about, like, our record transfer still only went dear at 35 mil. So, and again, like obviously love Emmy. Jury's still out on whether that was worth the money or not. So you don't want to go and obviously Leon was around 30 himself. You don't want to go and spend another 40 million quid and it potentially not work out. And they are very similar in profile, but I think as well, something that we're going to have to sort of come to terms with, mate, is Bertie realistically won't have much of a future at the club, I don't think. But they'll probably be looking to offload him. There's going to be other outgoings. I mean, we lost Anwar as well. We obviously sold him to PSV the other summer. We're going to have to fill that void. We're even talking, I think we mentioned Philogene Badesi the week as well. Sounds like he's going to be a player that's going to be sold, and obviously not somebody who's involved necessarily in the first team because he's had his loan spells at Cardiff and Stoke, but a position that obviously he occupies nevertheless. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. You obviously don't want to get burned, but I'd say watch this space. I think the thing is with Leon, I think a lot of the links for him, I recall United and City being interested. They were sort of after his first sort of 6 months to a year in the league. He was quite fresh to it still. And then obviously, I mean, we've seen how things have gone, really, haven't we? I think it's fair to say Leon hasn't lived up to what we know and maybe expected of him just yet. There are reasons with injury and all that kind of stuff. But Unai seems to like him. Diaby seems like a similar profile of player. So maybe there is something. But yeah, it's definitely one that I think we can get excited about, depending on the fee, as you say, mate. But still got plenty more to talk about. Obviously, the Euros, as you alluded to at the top, mate. How exciting was that? And what a lovely touch from the squad, holding up JJ's shirt, man, showing him some respect. Obviously, got a couple goals, was involved quite heavily, really. I know there's always a lot of rotation in these kind of games, but JJ always looked a class above when he plays. As did quite a lot of these guys, because obviously, I mean, when you're bringing guys like Curtis Jones, who I don't necessarily, think is the answer to Liverpool's midfield problems, but he's quite clearly too good to be playing under 21s international tournament football. And mate, England's squad was a joke, man.
Yep, no, it really was, mate. Massive congrats. So it's such a likable team as well. That's always good, isn't it? There's so many likable characters in there. But that's Cameron. I'll just Cameron out party right there. He's going to walk back to Bodymore Heath in the summer, slap that medal down on Unai's desk and be like, this is who I am. This is what I do. He's got all those goals now in the championship, back-to-back loans. He's now gone and done it. Under 21 European champion. What more do you want from me? Every chance that he has gotten, no matter what the level, even if for Villa, you think back, was it a hat-trick at Barrow? How many goals?
Hat-trick at Barrow, scored against Chelsea.
Bridge. Yeah, back-to-back loans. He's made the most of them. He continues, not just in these European Championships, but continues to go away with England and do it. And does it... I ask you this. If we were talking about a player from Brazil or France or Germany that was coming off the kind of 2 seasons, admittedly, I know it's in the second tier, but if you picked a player out the Eredivisie, right? Let's try and pick a European league that's got pound for pound similar kind of quality to the Championship. Coming off those kind of seasons.
Oh wait, we could even go off Gula. Sorry, he's just Real Madrid.
Yes,
I'd heard of him until last week.
Yes, exactly, and I just kind of think, is the answer not there? Is the answer not ready? I just kind of, and there was kind of talks as well that we were interested in other strikers playing at the same tournament. And I don't know, man. I don't know. I have. I'm going to go on record as saying, and I'm really hope that I'm wrong, but every day that this kind of goes on, I just get a worse feeling about this. It just feels that we've kind of doubled down on the fact that, I don't know, there's just been no real show of faith so far, and he keeps on impressing, he keeps doing all of this stuff, and there isn't really that sign from the club to say, yeah, don't worry, he's ours, he's sticking around. But we haven't really had that yet, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't worry me a little.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Folarin Balogun earlier, somebody who everybody knows I'm a huge fan of. He had quite a frustrating loan spell at Middlesbrough, only scored 3 goals. Finds himself at Lens, at Rennes this season. He scores 21 goals. You put Cameron Archer in League 1, he scores, top scorer is Mbappe with 29. Then we've got Lacazette on 27 at third, Joe David on 24. He scores 25 goals in League 1. Cam Archer does that. That's what he does. And that's the thing. He goes and does it at that level, and there's all this sort of clamour for him, like there is with Balogun. Of course it comes from maybe a different level, because obviously Arsenal, huge global fan base. They seem to have been lacking a number 9. Obviously Balogun, he's been in the headlines with America, all this kind of stuff, right? But Cam Archer would put the same numbers, if not better numbers, than both Joe David and Folarin Balogun have done last season in Ligue 1. And again, like, these are both players who we've said on this podcast, mate, we would wholeheartedly take. We're not talking about some schmucks here. So that same respect does need to be put on Cam Archer. And I think what's worse about it is we're all so anxious. Like, I think the general consensus on Cam Archer is we all rate him and we all really want him to succeed. We all want him to do well. The fact that we're all so unanimously in agreement, the whole Villa fan base, that never happens. When does that happen with Villa fans, mate? We all want Cam Archer to succeed. So I think that's where the anxiety comes from. That's where it comes from. But as you say, well, the thing is as well, he's almost at a disadvantage because he's gone to this tournament. Pre-season started yesterday. He only finished his tournament yesterday. He's technically got less time to impress him out because he's going to have at least a week off. You're going to imagine 2 weeks. He's going to want reassurances. I don't think money is going to be an issue. I think it's purely the kid just wants to play football. I don't know where we fit in Mick. Again, we just spoke about 2 players. Cam is going to have to operate in that second striker, wide right role. We just spoke about 2 players that we're going to potentially sign for £40 million. That's where the concerns come from, really, isn't it?
Yeah, no, what's equally as interesting is that I think it would take at least 20-25 million to get Villa to budge on Cam Archer. And it's like, if we're talking about a £20-25 million player that's sat right there, there's choose all this thing, just use him. I don't know, but I do have. I think the saving grace is that I don't think a newly promoted team would take that punt because it's a lot of money on someone that's never scored goals in the Premier League. And I don't think a Championship club is going to stump up that kind of cash. And I don't think a move abroad is going to come up in that time either. So maybe the asking price is going to be a saving grace. But, I've got a feeling that if he walks into Emery's office or whoever the loan manager is now that Mile Jedinek's gone, and he goes, yeah, it's another loan for you this season, Mr. Archer. I wouldn't begrudge him for saying, absolutely not. No, it's not another loan for me. I'm going to go now. And you couldn't blame him.
Yeah, and he's a Wolves fan as well. He's a Wolves fan, so there is that. Final thing before we go, mate. Ashley Young talked to me. Reportedly had offers from Luton. Everyone's like, oh, he's going to Luton. No, he's not. He played for Watford. He's not going to Luton. Absolutely not. But Everton reportedly interested as well, mate. I find that quite interesting.
Yeah. I don't know how to feel about it.
Are they down?
I don't know how to feel about it. That's like, kind of, I'm 50-50. Yeah.
Because obviously I wanted Ash to stay. I wanted us to keep him. I don't mean any disrespect to Ash when I say Everton down bad, but it does feel like the kind of that's where Everton are at right now, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, I wouldn't be very excited if I was an Everton fan. I want Ash to stay at Villa because I think he'd fit really nice into the rotation, and I kind of want him to join like the coaching sort of the upstairs setup. Like that's, I want him to play a few games here and there, and then make the transition into coaching or whatever he wants to do. sort of at the end of the season. That's why I wanted him to stay. I mean, if you're signing him to play as a sort of rotation piece, I know that Seamus Coleman sort of, like, I think they re-signed him as well, so they don't really know what the plan is at right. But like, yeah, it doesn't sound great, but I think Sean Dyche would quite like Ashley Young, to be honest with you.
I think he was, yeah. It does feel like a good fit. It'd be a shame because he's had the fairy tale return, and we're back into Europe and all this kind of stuff. If that isn't the end of your chapter in terms of your playing chapter, if that isn't where you decide to
that's a really good point.
So it's a nice note to end on. Obviously, Ash is more than capable of playing for another 2 years. Maybe the Prem, definitely the Championship. He's got it. He's got it in his head. But for the narrative, it would be nice if he just closed that personally.
Because if he goes to Everton and gets, like, if they get relegated or they're in another relegate, how toxic that can be, and then you hang your boots up.
Exactly. That's the thing. Die a hero, Ash. Die a hero. But we've got less than a minute left on this Zoom, so we best wrap up here. Guys, it's been great. Me and Dan are just absolutely buzzed to be back and to be talking about things. And hopefully we'll be back talking about Pau Torres, because, God, that's gone on for a little bit. But if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, comment your thoughts below. If you listen on Apple and Spotify, review, follow, all that jazz. Not the Villa.